Pastor, Reverend, the
He's
most holy Rob.
Oh yes.
There was a pastor friend of mine that he would get things in the mail that said like Reverend Andrew Nugent, and he hated it so much. He just didn't understand like the name specifically Reverend.
Oh, okay.
Like people are supposed to revere me, and he had a hard time with that.
And he wasn't. Was he a reverend? Like
he was a pastor.
Pastor, and then
yeah. But he even hated it when people called him pastor.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, some people don't like it because it sets. I think it sets this barrier up.
Yeah,
sure. I know. Yeah, it's not on my birth certificate.
Well, and I liked what he used to tell me a lot. He goes, when people, other than doctors, maybe, but like if you're a construction worker or a lawyer or something, people don't come up to you and say, "Oh, hi, my name is construction worker Andrew."
Well, Builder,
fair enough.
Look, Builder Bob.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I used to joke around about like wanting to be like a doctor for like NASA. And I always used to joke, like, if I'm a doctor for NASA, I'm making people call me doctor. Like, it's not, there's no option. Like,
yeah, you are Ross Geller.
Yeah, I paid a lot of money.
He's got his own Marcel, too.
It's one of those things that makes me feel like I paid a ton of money. I did a lot of schoolwork.
Like, and you will call me doctor.
I earned this.
I have earned the right to this, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of those titles that you do so much work for that by the time you get there, you're like, yeah, I will go by doctor. Thank you.
Which makes it so much less when people just call themselves doctor and they haven't done that work.
Yeah, that does take away. That's not. I don't know who does that.
Who does that?
Doctor Who?
Doctor Who. Doctor Who.
Is Doctor Who really a doctor?
Dr. John. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, it's just an interesting thing. So tonight I was doing some reading, just some random thought, but I was doing some reading about the Mars rover landing. Perseverance, I think, is the name of it.
I think so.
And I came across something that was really fascinating to me, and it was just an article that was talking about how they're doing different ways of exploring the universe, and one of the things that they programmed this Mars rover to do was to sing while it was on its descent onto the planet.
So did they say what they programmed it to sing?
The article didn't say what it was singing.
They didn't want to pay the copyright. I see what
exactly. It was probably When You Wish Upon a Star or something Disney that they can't.
They didn't want to reveal. I mean, it's hard to collect the.
It's like, sorry, Walt, we're not paying you for this one.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you didn't hear it on Mars, then you didn't have to pay. I don't know.
Okay, but that's why would you do that?
Well, the reason why they gave on this article was that they want the exploration to not be so serious, but B,
so serious,
like that hopeful attitude.
Humanity. Maybe.
Yeah, like we are positive or whatever.
We are the world.
Well, I mean, it's my generation that grew up with that, right? Like, it's our generation. So the children are our future, all that kind of stuff.
What a lie. No, I'm kidding. So this is really cool. Theron was telling me about this too. And apparently there was an opportunity that if you wanted to, you could sign up to have your name somehow written on or engraved on the rover. So he actually got his name on the rover.
Yeah, they had a limited number of spaces, I guess, and you can sign up for that. I don't know. I'm sure it's done now, but
it's probably too late now.
His name will be on Mars.
Yeah,
that's cool. It's very cool.
I
think it's interesting. It's interesting to see those kinds of things, especially for me. I really like music and stuff like that. So those kinds of things to me are just fascinating. That, like, in my opinion, nobody's listening as far as like aliens or anything like that. But it's just fascinating to be like, that's the first thing, because the hope is to colonize Mars. Now, whether we're around long enough to do that or whatever, I don't know. But like, the first step is something that's pleasant that everybody can relate to. Like music is definitely, it speaks all languages, all that kind of stuff. And
I think it's unifying because people of, it has I think it has a way to stretch into people's lives. Music does, that is different than anything else.
Right. Well, I mean, it's interesting because there's like, you can have people that don't understand one another verbally at all, and yet you put the same piece of music in front of their faces and they can instantly communicate with each other. Now, again, what they're communicating is limited to what that page is saying, but they are communicating with one another, and it's kind of neat to see people work like that. I always find like interest in that. And so even as, space exploration, and I'm a space geek, and so I enjoy, hearing about those kinds of things. And yes, thank you, Ken.
There's a reality check right there.
Yeah. That's someone who knows how.
I'm not looking for more lawns tomorrow.
How public service works. You have to clean up that planet too.
Yep.
Well, there was a few, like 10 years back or so, there was a guy that was trying to design the first rocket to go to Mars or something like that. I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but like first manned rocket is what he was trying for. And he was doing free signups for anybody that wanted to go on a one-way mission. And
no, I'm good.
All stocked up.
If I didn't have a family, and I would genuinely consider it. Like, wow. But now that I have kids and a wife and stuff and like responsibilities, I guess
maybe it's this like you've got that homesteading idea, right? Like you're like, I'm a homestead. Let's do it like from the beginning. Let's
like this is that land. Like, go ahead, Alaska. You have your final frontier. I'll go to Mars and get it done.
Somehow I don't think that would end well.
I'm not.
I can't imagine. Well, and I don't remember who it was that was offering the one-way ticket, but I mean, it would have to be somebody more than just like Frank next door, like building a rocket in his backyard.
Oh, for sure.
Go do that. But it is interesting because it brings up the idea of like, do we or should we be exploring outside of the earth? Like, morally speaking, even I've heard some Christians say it's none of our business. Like, God didn't create us to go outside of this world. And so there is an interesting, I don't want to call it a moral argument for space exploration, but just should we be doing it?
I think some people absolutely. I've heard people argue that it's just a huge waste of money. Like, that it is that our resources could be used here on like this planet. And so to have all that money wasted in their minds. But there's definitely lots of things that have developed here on Earth due to the innovations that they have made scientifically.
Right. Yep. Well, yeah, and that's the thing is it's like everybody has something that they can fight about, I guess. But it makes me
like, if you're into space, cool.
Well, that's the thing is like, to me, it's like, I don't understand the big deal. But I've heard people compare it to like the Tower of Babel, like trying to reach, somewhere where we're not meant to reach type of thing.
I think the internet has a stronger case for that. The whole idea of bringing things back together that were once dispersed.
Sure.
But I don't
know. Yeah, well, it's interesting. You can get lost in some of the articles, and that's the other thing that I noticed that I was going to mention tonight is that just there's a vast difference between articles and imagery and graphics that attract someone in my age or someone with my whatever political standing and background and all those kinds of things compared to like the younger generation now. Like, and I was looking at some of the fashion things that kids are into and things like that. And I just, to me, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody, but I don't understand fashion.
Well, there's a huge thing, a trend right now on TikTok and Instagram Reels that is talking about how Gen Z is telling millennials that they shouldn't be parting their hair on the side anymore.
Why?
And they shouldn't be wearing skinny jeans. Like, it's over.
Okay, so I'll just go on record and say this. Men out there checking this out, I don't care how old you are, stop wearing women's pants.
I don't think we were talking about that, but the idea is that the fashion is totally different. Like what they perceive is, and then you just have people responding who are of millennial age, showing themselves with the center part, just going like, this is not, like, it's just not cool. Like, it's a whole
but like what's better? Because
yeah, they're like, come on, it's over.
The problem is what's better in their mind, because I look at some of the like music videos that I've seen recently, and I've seen, again, some of the articles and things like that, and it's like people wearing just the most crazy, ridiculous thing, at least in my mind, and I just am like, is that what I'm supposed to dress like? Or is it okay to press into flannels, dad shoes, like whatever? Like,
people have done that weird stuff for a long time. I remember in high school, we had a guy who had these safety pins that he used on his jeans all the way up the side on both legs.
Only a guy?
Only the guy did that. But it was all the way up the side. Now, we always laughed at him because we figured, you know what? If you ever fall down and the safety pins release, you are getting like
we did
acupuncture immediately.
In junior high, it was huge. We all did it.
Safety pins.
Well, not all the way up the leg, but it was a thing to make skinny jeans, because we
use safety pins to fix zippers.
Okay, well,
this is well, and I dressed in like blazers, and I painted my toenails, and I did some weird things.
You also had a phase of, like, what was it? School T-shirts? Like you wear middle school
elementary school T-shirts.
Like a thrifter who liked to go and find. Like,
that was my hippie days. I still have my Pot Springs Elementary School Jump-a-thon T-shirt.
Nice.
Jump-a-thons.
Where did those go?
Oh, it's like skip rope for heart, right?
Yeah, up here. I don't know if you had that, but we had skip rope for heart. So we had skip rope for heart T-shirts.
Because we're wordy.
Yeah.
Skip-a-thon is so much easier.
Jump-a-thon.
Sorry, jump-a-thon.
Skipping is for that's
so yesterday.
Yesterday.
Well, that was
that's for people who part their hair down the middle.
Yeah. That was the girls when I was a kid had skip-its. Did you guys have?
skip-its. Yeah,
that was like the ball.
You strapped yourself into the plastic cone of death and then swung a weight around.
It would go under one ankle. You'd have like a round part foot in, and then you'd swing the weight around.
Yeah, and it would count how many times you could swing it.
Yeah.
That was an elementary school mace.
I bet that would be
like that hurt.
You could probably get a Peloton class now for that thing.
You'd have to pay $500 to get one of those skip-its.
And skip.
And skip.
I wonder about like those kinds of things sometimes, because I remember having a conversation at the last job I worked. I was the young adults pastor. And I remember having a conversation with the senior pastor, and I was just like, I don't think I'm good at being a young adults pastor. And he was like, why is that? And it was no great, like, it wasn't a theological issue or anything like that, but it was because I didn't want to dress the way young adults wanted to dress, and I didn't want to pursue into the things that young adults pursued into as far as social media and things like that. And so like it just made it really difficult to connect. And sometimes, like, personally, I just wonder, like, is this what Paul is saying when he says we become all things to all men? Does he mean that we part our hair down the middle?
But like, I hold fast. Do not wear women's jeans. Like,
if he's asking me to part my hair down the middle, I don't think it's happening. But
I have photos of when we first came to Canada with my hair parted down the middle. It was not awesome.
Big mistake.
It was in the 90s when I was growing up. We called it the butt cut.
Oh, yeah.
Like the...
Yeah.
I don't even want to know why.
That's I think when you think about style and about preferences, I think there's people who are naturally they are older in like, I mean, they like you always say, like you like to be like an old man, or like you're ready like, and I think there's some people who press into the trends and some people who are more timeless and like to keep things very, very simple.
And some of us let our wives choose what we wear.
Well, I that like again, what Janet was saying, it brings it back to kind of what we were talking about on Sunday with Sunday with the youth kids, and that conversation there is like, I can't decide if it would be beneficial for me to try and
wear a beanie.
Yeah, like wear a beanie or like wear something other than a flannel, like to reach someone, or if that ship has sailed and me doing that would be like
disingenuous.
Yeah, exactly. Like they can smell that a mile away, and like, am I gonna be more effective for the gospel based on what I dress like as?
Absolutely. I think that's probably, I think what they're more looking for, I think, is truth, is to say,
absolutely.
like, genuineness goes a long way.
Yeah.
I think the fact that, at least what I saw in our conversations, that I really respected them was they were being so honest, and they were being so clear about things that they were looking for. And I think that's something that we can move towards.
So all I interpret that as saying is that I'm okay to keep wearing my flannels. Like,
but if you did decide to move in a different direction, I'm just going to let you know now that I'll be thoroughly entertained.
I'll go back to my cutoff shorts and my deep V-necks. Like,
so there are limits, man.
When I was a worship pastor, that's what I dressed in. I think my wife still has proof.
Yes. Yeah,
that's funny.
I think that sounds like a tragic thing.
It's funny.
Yeah. You were going to go on to, I think we were talking about what
questions people ask.
Well, and I think what Andrew just talked about was what makes us, what is the connection point? Like, what are people interested in? And I think that is one of those things that can connect us back to questions of how do we be relevant with people about Christianity. So, yeah, nice.
It wasn't junior high school T-shirts; it was elementary school T-shirts.
Which is
so much worse.
But those are the ones that you could find at the thrift store. So
yes,
they're the specific ones I looked for. But.
So it is safe to say that is not the thing that attracts people to Christianity.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the questions. Like when we talk about like questions that people ask. They're looking for reasons to be attracted to Christianity. They're looking for
at least to understand what we're about.
And
right?
I think to understand, and I think being willing to answer questions and be honest is very important.
Absolutely.
So one of the ways to try and figure out what kinds of questions people are asking is you can go to YouTube, and YouTube is the number 2 used search engine on the planet. And so all I did was I typed in, why do Christians... And then I hit enter.
Because you just wanted to see the results.
I just wanted to see what people were asking. Why do Christians do this or that or believe this or that? And so for tonight, I just thought, I'm going to throw some of these things out there and let's have a conversation about it. Sure. So the first one, I'm just going to dive right in. You ready?
Yep.
Why do Christians freak out about everything?
Oh, wow. Online, I feel like I would say there's freaking out happening on both ends. Like there's definitely, you can see comments from non-believers and atheists under posts just as often as believers. I don't know.
I think that part of it goes to, like, I was talking to a person who was a non-believer just a couple months ago, and I was talking to them, and they asked me, why do most Christians disagree with the progressive left as far as political?
Okay.
Okay.
And it opened up an opportunity for me to explain, some of the definitely political views that I hold to. But I told this person, because he was like, I can't believe, don't you understand that just sounds crazy? And it's scary that you guys would fight so hard against the rest of, the left or whatever. And I told him, I was like, but on our side of things, we are scared, and I think that sometimes when we don't understand and when we don't have a correct view of our faith and how big our God is, we can get so scared that we feel like we need to yell, to be heard. And so like right now, the way the world is going, the way, we feel like anyway, politics and things like that are going, I feel like people are starting to get frazzled. And when they start to get frazzled and feel like they're backed into a corner, they start freaking out. And
I think it also depends on what the topic is. Like there's certain topics that as believers
are hot buttons.
They're kind of hot button topics for us, right?
Sure.
Yeah. But I would argue, so to speak, is that from the beginning of time, there were people who were, I know, the beginning of time. They were arguing about things. I mean, I think that's part of human nature is to say like, I don't agree with you and I'm going to go in a different direction. I mean, when you look at biblical stories, you're seeing warring nations over, sometimes we think we should worship on this mountain and we think, the Samaritans, for example, basically at the end of the day, it was like, we disagree. We think we should worship over here and you think you should worship over here. So now we're not even going to talk to you. So I think that's a part of a human nature problem, is that we don't do very well at negotiation and I think listening to the other perspective.
I think that's fair. And I think that there is a desire to have people agree with us, right? Like, so we hold our positions
to be validated.
Yeah, we need them to be validated, but we hold a lot of positions to heart very strongly, right? And those things that we hold very strongly, there's a tendency, I think, to want people to agree with us. And when we don't see that agreement, or we feel threatened by the lack of agreement, there's a greater likelihood that we're going to
freak out.
Well, for lack of better ways of saying it, I mean, these guys talk about it as freak out. Now, admittedly, they're talking about specific topics that I'm not sure we want to get into tonight,
right.
But why do people freak out?
It does seem like Christians are very opinionated against everything that mainstream is, like everything mainstream. It does feel like sometimes Christians are just against.
Again, yeah, and I think absolutely when you look at especially the media, it seems to definitely like to bring up what we are against, not what we are for.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what Ed says there, if you could throw that up there, Rob, like that's
threw it up.
100 gross. It's so true, because like I know what it feels like when people don't extend grace to me.
Yeah.
And yet I do it often in disagreements, whether it's religious, political, whatever, those hot button topics. We need to, again, the saying goes, we need to learn how to agree. We need to learn how to agree to disagree agreeably.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that is a lot, like you just said about being in a space where someone's giving you grace. I think that if we give each other grace when we have conversations, we can be passionate about our side. It's not about always saying, there's a difference between being agreeing with someone or being agreeable and agreeing.
Yeah. I like what Lisa says, the idea that that what the view we're presenting happens to be like that biblical worldview. It's God's, not just our own. Yeah. And I think there's a reasonable statement to say that as we get further down the road, maybe further towards, the return of Christ, that we're going to see an even greater divide in the things that, believers, the Christian church holds to be true and authentic and stuff to stand on. Compared to what we might see in the world, because let's face it, the church is called to be a counterculture entity, right?
What's interesting is, again, even the different factions of the church can be just as livid against each other as us against the world. It's
functional family.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so often, especially in Christian circles, that we would be quicker to extend grace to non-believers sometimes than we are to extend it to other people, or sorry, people that we say we believe the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's true. Like the idea of extending grace, what we expect out of people. I think our expectations of other believers are different than our expectations of people outside the church. The trouble is, like Ken says here, yeah, I think it's true that we do expect unbelievers or non-believers to act like believers. It's what we want for them, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes that means we hold them to, it's not, we want them to have knowledge and the saving knowledge of Jesus. We don't have, like, wanting moral behavior is different, like, or than expecting it. Like, I don't expect someone, we shouldn't be expecting a non-Christian to behave or act.
Well, Phil Vischer talks about it from the perspective of causing people or desiring people to live Christianly without knowing anything about Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if I don't recommend it necessarily, but even if you put yourself in a non-believer's shoes and try and look at things from their perspective, sometimes it can open your eyes to the fact that we live a different life than they do. We believe a different, I mean, we wake up and we pray, or we wake up and we praise, or we wake up and we serve Jesus. That is not the norm for a person who is not, who is like an atheist or an agnostic or something like that, who is not religious in any way, shape, or form. Very few of those people are waking up and thanking God for anything.
Especially in the storm, like especially when things are difficult, especially when we are when they're suffering,
and when there's polarizing topics, right?
Yeah,
you know. But absolutely, there are other things, like that people are asking, and it's why do Christians? Well, there's all kinds of things. Like, why do Christians believe in Jesus? Why do they believe the Bible? There are these pivotal questions, I think, that.
And I think even just believing the Bible is one of those ones where people, you kind of hear some misconceptions where people say, well, how do you know? Like, for example, I've heard people say something like, maybe it's just like a big game of telephone. People, told, it's like an oral story. Somebody told somebody. So how do you know that this is actually true?
Yeah.
Like, how can we trust? And I think it's why the Dead Sea Scrolls was such a big, pivotal, proving moment, that they have all these pieces of the Bible that is identical to
very limited variations is the way that it's described, right? And even that, like the notion that people would posit forward saying that this whole telephone book idea or the game of telephone is really, really inaccurate when you actually study oral tradition.
And how the scribes worked, right? Like, it's not like I just heard something, then I wrote down what I thought I heard.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I mean, I have you can buy, timelines of everybody from Adam to Jesus biblically, and when they lived and all those things. And it's interesting because, like, Methuselah was old enough to have known Adam. Like, and so this wasn't, and Methuselah is Noah's granddad or dad. I think
grandfather.
I think granddad. And so, like, I mean, that's not 27 generations of disconnect. It's literally, it went from Adam to Methuselah to Noah, and then between Noah and Moses is just a couple more generations. It's like you're talking maybe 6 different family, stories or whatever. And so it's not like you're getting thousands of years of dilution.
Well, and I think, again, the important thing is to understand how oral tradition works, right? Like, you were required to recite it word for word. So you weren't able to just say, in my own words, like, there was no such thing as that. There was, you recite it word for word, pass it down generation to generation. And this wasn't something that was going to go away, and then, of course, the written language came and things started getting written down. The belief is with Moses. Here, what do we got here from Shane is telling me? Not that you have to like it or respect that they know what they are doing. I'll confess I have no idea where
how that connected. That maybe it was.
Maybe I noticed it too late.
But I think when we talk about why we believe in Jesus and that who he is, I think when like that question was related a little bit more to just Jesus too. But there's definitely people who would say, well, was he just a historical figure? Was he, how do we know that he was really the Messiah? And I think that those questions often get linked to science, like to, saying it's what's possible. And
I would say that the biggest thing that I see in specifically with science is that people, especially in the world, say that there is a huge disconnect between faith and science. And I would say that there's the opposite of that in my world, but that's what it comes back to. Why do we believe in Jesus? Well, to some extent, believing in what Jesus did as far as dying on the cross and raising again 3 days later comes down to faith. A lot of it, because we have faith in the things unseen, and to some extent, that's how God set it up, because God is a God that wants us to believe in him, not because of what he can do for us, but because of who he is.
Yeah.
And so I think like
it's about changing hearts, right? Like faith is about changing the heart. So it's coming from a place of heart.
Yeah.
I think, Lisa, you're right. I do think that there are a lot of people in the world that would rather have proof than faith. And so I would ask one question, and it's not my question. I didn't come up with it. I heard it from Andy Stanley, and I think it's a fantastic question. What would cause you to believe that your brother was your God? And we talk about the life of James, who James and the family believed that Jesus was out of his mind, right? Like that was the belief. To go from that to some extent opposing Jesus to then all of a sudden you are the leader of the Church of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you go from complete disbelief to now you're the leader of the Church of Jerusalem? And the only thing that happened in between, and we read about it in book of, I believe, 1 Corinthians, where the only thing you see in between those two accounts is the resurrected Jesus appearing to James. That's it. That's what we have. And so what would cause you to believe that your brother was your God? Because you got to remember, like James died for this belief.
Yeah, I imagine it would be very difficult. And we even read about Thomas, and dude gets a bad rap because we all call him Doubting Thomas, and that's supposedly his big, failure or whatever. And it's like, man,
more inquisitive.
Yeah.
But I think that he's representative of a huge segment of people.
I would say the majority, because again, if some dude was to show up at my doorstep tonight and say he was Jesus Christ, there would be certain questions that I would ask, and some of them would definitely be, let's see the scars, because that's going to be not a big indicator, because anybody can do that, but like it's part of it, like being able to actually see the scars in the hands and the wounds that he knew his Savior, or at least his rabbi, were inflicted upon him. Like, I don't blame Thomas for being like, prove it. Like,
But there had to be something, and I think one of the stories about all through the New Testament, as you see Jesus talking to people, there had to be something so amazing about his presence, because, when he approaches a stranger and begins to talk to them, when you think about the disciples, when you think about the woman at the well, when you think about like just people he approached, there had to be something about him that just like was reassuring. And like, because for someone to just, obviously they're in a different context than we are. They are studying, like they're only knowing the Old Testament. They are looking for the prophecies. They are looking for the Messiah. So they are looking for certain things. But when you are just fishing or you are collecting water, you're not expecting the Messiah to walk up to you and pick you to say, I'm going to tell you who I am. And I think there's something, like there had to be something about his presence that was
Well, and there's a few other things for me. Like, for example, in the Babylonian Talmud, Jesus is recorded as a historical character where there is the actual Sanhedrin speaking about Jesus, talking about him as the usurper, talking about him as the miracle performer, and the and so it was all very negative connotations about him, but he's described in the Babylonian Talmud. Now that's what you would call an extra biblical source, right? Like it's outside of the scripture,
indicating he existed.
So he's an actual historical figure. So here we go. We've got a man who is an actual historical figure, where his followers write down his teachings, and the entire Western world, I would suggest, was completely altered on the basis of who this man was. Yeah. So I kind of look at, say, what does this guy say about himself?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's hard because everybody has, we talked about stories last week, and I think everybody has a reason why Jesus is valuable to them as far as who he is and what he's done for them. And so it's kind of hard. That's a really hard question to answer as a blanket statement of, well, why do Christians believe in Jesus? It's kind of like, well, because he met me where I was,
Yes. And the idea that he sees that the world, we come from different perspectives, and in all of those different perspectives that we're in, he meets us.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I don't know that that's a blanket answer, like if we can blanket answer that, but it definitely is something that means something to us, and is precious to us in our own personal life, and should change us for sure.
So if it should change us, I like what Ken's asking here, right? Like,
oh, sure.
All right, then what is it about us that people should like how should people recognize Jesus in us then, right? So again, we go back to, so what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus, right? And
for me, humility is like, it's uncommon. It is, we're called to it. And to be humble is like, that's a huge part of who his character was and like how he behaved.
Yeah.
I mean, so to me, as we behave humbly and not boastfully, I think that's part of it. And I think that's definitely countercultural right now to talk about, to be not so self-indulgent.
Even within the church.
Yeah, sure. I find it fascinating that you don't see Jesus ripping apart the people who knew they were sinners.
Yeah.
Like he didn't attack anyone that was quote unquote a sinner. He attacked the religious leaders,
the pious.
He attacked the pious.
He didn't beat the sheep. Is the way Gail Irwin would put it. and I think that's what Janet said is a cheater answer. You're a cheater.
I'm a cheater.
because I believe that humility is the foundation of every other aspect.
Sure.
Like if we're talking about grace, if we're talking about forgiveness, if we're talking about the things that are tangible that people can see in us that actually change and who we are, so that people can see Jesus in me, it, in my opinion, very close to starts with humility. And I think that the opposite of that is the same with sin, is that all sin, in my opinion, can be linked back to pride.
Well, sure.
And our desire to, fix our problem ourselves or fix the need ourselves. And so the flip side of that is humility, and so I think that covers a lot of those bases as far as looking like Jesus.
And I think his gentleness, it goes back to humility. Obviously it's linked, but the gentleness and how he handled people and even sinful people, when he talked to Zacchaeus, or when he talked to the woman at the well, or when he talked to, he could have been much firmer, or could have been, these were people who were living and viewed by other Christians or other believers, are followers of God, as sinners and not suitable. to talk to, or to be having at your house for dinner, or to go to the, like, to hang out with.
Even the demons, when he's talking to people who are possessed by demons, I definitely I read, and in my head I hear authority, but I don't hear
anger
or even
aggressiveness.
I think there's a couple of times when you might see Jesus be frustrated, you know, like I think we see frustration, but I think even then you see this frustration that it's like, man, I want to be a dad with that kind of frustration, you know, not a dad with the human frustration that I have, you know, with
But again,
my
it wasn't the sheep, right? It wasn't the people. He wasn't like that with even somebody, the demons. He wasn't.
It's interesting because even the demons obey him, right? So you talk about that authority. And I find that remarkable because I look around, I look at my own life, and I find that I sometimes have difficulty obeying him. So like even the demons obey. Not Rob Haslam, not all the time. Right?
Well, I've even heard of. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, like obedience, I think comes along with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you love me, then you will obey my commands, right? And so obedience comes along with it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ignore some of the stuff that Shane's talking about here. He talks about the idea of being obedient to government, the idea of being obedient to the fact that God placed governments, regardless of where they are, in power, and that refusing to obey them is like, if refusing to obey the law is refusing to obey God. Really, what comes down to, right?
And I think it's also, you have to know his law. Like you need to know his word.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about like with demons that's interesting to me. I heard a guy teaching about it, and he said, is your faith as strong as the demon's faith, or is it stronger? Because the demons fear and tremble. The demons fear, and they know the word of God. You know, they know who he is. They know these things. And a lot of Christians, I think, they know how they're supposed to talk or how they're supposed to act and all those kinds of things. But that's as far as their faith goes, is kind of the head knowledge. And I think that's a convicting thought for me, is that I sometimes think like, oh, I know a lot about Jesus or something. And then it's like, Satan probably knows more. And he's not in a great stand, you know, he's not in a great position.
So even that, if you couple those things together, if you couple humility, and I think if you're truly walking in the place of humility, there's a higher likelihood of obedience. Yeah, because you're not going to try and elevate self. Right. And so you'll walk in obedience. And when you walk in obedience, that's just a different way to live.
And I think when we do that, it's coupled also with gratitude. Like as we respond to things, we know that all things are from him and to him and through him, and that lens.
And for him.
And for him.
Not for us.
That's right. So that lens on the things we do and how we act and what we strive for, it should adjust what our goals.
Sure.
Yeah. And now I'm going to confess for myself, that's really hard sometimes. Like even as a person who works full-time in ministry, that can be a very difficult thing to grasp as well as put into action.
Sure.
You know, and so that's where I think it's a harder question to answer than just, oh, it's this, and this, and that, there's your prescription. Now go do it. You know, like there's lifestyle changes, there's attitude changes, there's mind changes, there's heart changes, you know, that have to take place. And that's where I think when Paul talks about disciplining our bodies, you know, in that sense, that we discipline, we discipline ourselves, we train ourselves to win the race. And that's where all of that comes into play. Like we don't just rest on knowing it. We have to put it into action. Like I know that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know that eating, you know, fried food every day of the year and 3 times a day is bad for me. But until I stop eating the fried food, I'm not going to get any healthier.
Right. I was going to say that. So of course we understand that the disciples were Jewish and Jesus lived in that Jewish context. And in order to be a person who would be able to say, I know something, in the Jewish context means that it has to translate in actively
in action
in your life, right? Otherwise, you don't know it. So when Paul says things like, I pray that you will know the fathomable love of God, like the love of God that is unknowable in terms of the depths and fullness of it, that it is to change every aspect of your being. And so when we talk about it,
knowing isn't knowledge, isn't just academic knowledge.
It's life transformation.
It's transformation.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of people I've heard, and I don't know if there's it was definitely an old 90s Christianese quote, but the whole idea that a lot of people are going to miss out on heaven by 18 inches because that's the distance between your brain and your heart. And it's cheesy, but it definitely makes sense to me because, again, for a long time in my high school career, when I was, rock star youth kid or whatever, I thought that it was about just how much I knew and how many books I had read. And that was what was going to get me, maybe not into heaven, but the respect of those who are going into heaven. And therefore, God will have to let me in too, Right. And so until you let it change who you are, all of these things, you're just giving lip service.
Yeah. Hey, here's another one. You ready?
Sure.
You're gonna love this one.
We got
a couple of minutes, but I think Andrew's gonna knock this one out of the park.
Oh, geez, that's a lot of pressure.
Setting it up for our baseball lover over here. All right, you ready? Why do Christians sing?
Oh, because we're weird.
Oh, good. I should clarify. I don't sing. I make a joyful noise.
Yeah. I think we have biblical precedent to sing to the Lord. The whole book of Psalms is a great precedent on why we sing. And I also think, personally, for me, it is a natural reaction because, again, I'm kind of a music guy. And so it's a natural reaction of what I like. A great way to spread emotion is to sing a song. It's a great way to show emotion without, I don't know, getting tripped up on words, because sometimes I don't talk too good. And then being able to sing a song is a much better way to praise. I don't know, praising just feels like singing.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I've always.
And I think it's unifying because, like you said, if we don't have the words, when we say these words together, musically, like it's a way for us to together get to a place where we are preparing and opening our hearts and saying we're ready to receive the word, which I think is why we do it in a church service before the message, for example, it's because we're setting our minds unified together on a concept to say we're ready to accept teaching into our heart, not just our head.
Do you think it's also, there's something that takes place collectively when we come together and we sing together, like we offer that forward, that unison of word and of thought, like I think collectively.
You go to the book of Revelation where they're singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty.
Which is an awesome song.
Which is an awesome song. And we're going to be singing a new song is what Revelation talks about to him, those kinds of things. And you see that there's I don't want to use the word battle cry, but there is that unified coming together and proclaiming who God is. And yes, what he's done for us, but it's more about, like, worship is not so much about what God has done for me and more about who he is just naturally.
And there's got to be something about song that is not just for believers, because when you look at why do people have like a theme song, why is there
or national anthems?
An anthem, why is there a war cry, why does a sports team like to come out to music, why do we sing certain songs like when we're at the ball game or when you're at the there are things that I think naturally as a human we are designed for, and I think music is one of them.
I think that there's very few people that I've known in my life that genuinely just don't have some sort of music that they like. Even the people who say, "What's that?"
That's no. Don't ask, Andrew.
No, you said the word. No. But like there's people that I've known that have been like, oh, I hate all music. But then I'll walk in on them reading and they're listening to just like some beats. And it's like, well, that's music, whether you like it or not, that's doing something. And so I feel like there's something that connects our, sorry, this is going to get all hippie on you guys. I apologize. But like there's something that connects our soul to music. And when we are singing, I believe, again, I just truly believe it is one of the purest ways that we can express our heart. And it's one of the best ways that we can show others as well as ourselves that we are, truly in love with someone or something, I guess.
Yeah, I actually think that so there's a reason I think people are so attached to whether they appreciate hymns or choruses and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with it feels almost like a spiritual language. Shane talking about some studies that have been done that confirm the idea that there's a sense of bonding that that it does, right? And I think that's that unified voice, that focus. But I think all throughout our human history, we can show that there is an attachment to song that rallies the people towards a common good, a common goal. I think here, Shane, not Shane, sorry, PJ? Where are we at here?
Oh, sorry.
Sam. S. Reimer. It's the unifying experience, the battle cry, right? You know, PJ pajama freezing. You know, I like how he says it because singing together is much less creepy than chanting. Hey, there's nothing wrong than a good old Gregorian chant.
Well, even what Ed is saying about like the idea of easy, like it kind of reminds me of the idea of like when you learn your ABCs, you learn them in song form so that you can remember it easier.
Yeah.
And so even this idea of remembering who God is and remembering his promises and remembering what he's done for us, all those kinds of things are like singing is just a good way to remember it.
Yeah. I think song is fantastic. Song draws us together. It does things that we weren't aware of in the past, right? You know, we've got Melissa saying super unrelated, but Janet's hair looks super good. I have to tell you, it does, Janet.
Yeah, I rock fantastic.
The bun. Nobody ever tells me that my hair looks good.
Yeah, well, it's about the changes, Andrew. See, when you have the same outfit on and the same hair.
If I part it in the middle, will that?
I will comment. Don't worry. If you part it down the middle, I'll make comments for you, man.
Yes,
all good.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, I do like to rock the bun.
You rock the bun. There you go. Hey guys, that concludes our evening. I hope you enjoyed the chat that we had here today. I certainly enjoyed the input that we were having. And so we're just going to wrap it up and we'll see you guys
next week.
Yeah.
Have a great night, everybody.
All right. Take care.